Now, as we go through a village, I would like you to take me through this village and we will go through it, seeing what is in there. In this village, imagine there's only one family. You're probably asking yourself, a village of one family, how's that possible? The Shitandi family. Who is Shitandi? As we go through this village, we shall learn who it is. Now, Shitandi was a very lazy man. In fact, he was internationally known for his laziness.
Wow.
He had a wife, a very brilliant wife, who did most of the work in the house. In fact, she did the impossible, which I can't even mention here. Now, Shitandi also had 3 children. In this village, there came a time where the drought started. Everything was dry, the cattle were dying, the crops were dying, and food was very scarce. So, Shitandi's wife was to work very hard in order to get and provide food for her family. So she would leave very early in the morning and come back with what she could find just to feed her children. And Shitandi would always impatiently wait for her on his 3-legged stool, waiting for his wife to come.
Oh! This woman, Mama Shitandi, guy, she's so late. I wonder when she's coming back. I'm hungry. Najua tu anataka kuniua huyu. She wants to kill me. But sitakufa mimi. Siwezi kufa. I can't. I wonder when she's coming. Nasikia njaa.
And just as he was looking around his compound, he turned to the granary and saw a mouse leaving.
Mama Shitandi anakuja saa ngapi?
And 3 hours later, the mouse came back, running. But this time, it had a grain in its mouth.
Mama Shitandi,
And so, this happened for the next 3 days. The mouse would always leave the granary and come back with a grain in its mouth.
Panya, this mouse, it's coming every time with a grain in its mouth. Tomorrow I'll follow it. Ndaona pali inaenda.
So the next day, he woke up very early, wore his coat, wore his pants, his boots, his cap, and his stick under his arm. And he waited for the mouse to leave the granary. And as soon as it left, they went out of the compound, out of the dry lands, out of the dry village. And wow, he came into green lands. And he continued following this mouse until they came into a green compound. This compound was so green. And it had healthy animals. Cows, goats, sheep. But these animals weren't green like the grass. But as he was looking around, admiring, he turned just in time to see the mouse entering a hut. And he followed the mouse. Inside, he found plenty of food. And he smiled. And he sat down. He cooked for himself. Sat down.
This food is nice. It's all mine. Wow.
So he talked to himself. Shitandi had a habit of talking to himself. So, this is how the conversation went.
Myself. We're making a promise between you and I, okay? This is a promise. We will not tell anyone about this. This heart is a secret between you and I.
And just like that, Shitandi promised himself that he would not tell anyone about the hut and the food that he found there. So every morning that Mama Shitandi would leave the house, Chitandi would always wait for her, just so that she can leave. And immediately he knew that she left, he would go to the hut, eat to his fill, and come back home before his wife would come. Over time, Chitandi became healthier. He gained weight and he looked even more healthy than before the drought started. One day, Mama Chitandi came home early. She looked around the compound and noticed her husband was not there. So she turned to her children. Watoto wangu! Watoto wangu! Wapi baba yenu? Kalenda. Where's your mother? Sinauliza swali. But one of the children turned to her and said, Mom, najua baba anatokanga. Dad normally lives with you. We don't know where he goes. And Chitandi's wife looked at the child and said, okay, acha niende kwa jikoni. And she went into the kitchen and started cooking the meal. That day, Chitandi went to the hut, but he cooked such a heavy meal. What do you think he ate? Chicken, ugali, matoke, fish, guashi. But today, Chitandi decided to do a very heavy combination of ugali and uji. So by the time he was done eating, he slept so soundly. And when he woke up, it was late.
I need to go home before my wife comes. I'll be late.
And he ran home. But who did he find there? His wife at the table eating with her children. And the wife turned to him. No, Matokapi, where do you come from?
Unajua, ilikuwa majani.
Majani imefanya nini?
Tea leaves. I was going for tea leaves to drink with the food of drought, but naona mmeshiba sana.
Okay. Kula. And that day, Chitandi ate with his family. But Mama Chitandi became very suspicious. One of her children told her that his Baba Chitandi has been leaving every day. And he seems to be healthier than all of them. So, the next day, she woke up as usual. And instead of going to look for food, Mama Chitandi hid behind a bush and waited to see where Baba Chitandi would go. And Baba Chitandi, as usual, left the hut knowing his wife had gone to look for food and went to the hut. And Mama Chitandi followed him slowly to see where he would go. Chitandi entered the green garden and entered the hut, cooked his food and sat down at the table. Mama Chitandi was still outside the compound, wondering, where is this place? What is this? Whose hut is that? And Mama Chitandi entered the hut and found Chitandi sitting at the table, eating very greedily. Chitandi! Chitandi! What is this?
Umefika hapa saa ngapi? Umefika hapa aje? Have you gotten here?
Umefanya nini hapa Chitandi?
Umejua aje hapa? How do you know here? Yawa. It was a promise made between me and myself. I couldn't tell anyone just about it. Okay.
And Mama Chitandi sat down with Chitandi. And they went home that day to their children. And she decided that she would take her whole family and go and live in the green garden. So the next day, Mama Shitandi and her children, Shitandi, went to the green garden. And that day, Mama Shitandi decided to make a feast to celebrate that they had found good land, that they had good food, and they would not be hungry anymore. I need some of you to help me celebrate. Chitandi's wife and the children were celebrating, and Chitandi sat very far from them, angry. In fact, he was furious. How did his wife find out about this place?
Myself, did you tell anyone about this? Maybe you. How could I tell my wife? I've not told anyone.
And just as he was thinking to himself, he heard a noise from outside.
What is that? I'm hearing my things. I need to sleep.
And Shitandi went to sleep that night. The next day, Mama Shitandi and the children celebrated again that they had food. And they ate to their fill that day. And the children were so full that they ended up sleeping on the table. And Shitandi sat. And all of a sudden, a knock at the door.
Mama Shitandi, come to mlango. Mama Shitandi, go open the door.
Again. Again.
Mama Shitandi, misi ugopi ende ufungue. Ama wewe unaogopa.
Again.
Open the door.
A noise from outside.
Open the door.
So Shitandi woke up from his chair and went to open the door. And as soon as he opened it, he was faced with 3 ugly creatures. They had a long nose, whiskers on their faces, saliva dripping and sputtering on the ground that brought numerous houseflies. Their eyes were dark maroon with no pupils, short whiskers, and dark patches scattered around their body. They rushed into the house, went to the table, ate the food, and looked at Mama Shitandi.
You've cooked right. Yes, you've cooked right. Now what are we going to do? We shall come every day and eat this food of yours. Make sure you cook in plenty, okay?
And they left. The next day, the 3 hyenas came, sat down and made sure to eat very hastily and would always leave. Now as they continued coming, the food became so little. Mama Shitandi thought, and she decided to take 5 goats and hide them outside the compound where no one would find them.